Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams-Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams-Birch, and today, returning guest Ruth Hartt is going to share with you a lot of numbers. Do not turn off this podcast because I said numbers. These numbers are absolutely monumental as we are working to advocate for change in our organizations, in our arts communities, in our world. This conversation with Ruth is one of those where you feel a little dire with the numbers, but also so excited and optimistic about the possibilities of the future. We kick off the conversation talking about the recently released 2022 Survey of Public Participation, the SPP, in the arts that was released by the NEA. Ruth has done all the hard work and shows you all of the trends and what that means for us in the arts world. But then the best part, how do we change the trajectory of these numbers? Ruth is a relevance strategist, and we talk about this, just so many awesome things in this episode. So I hope that you will listen, power through all of the numbers, and if you want to see the numbers, I've included a link to a downloadable slide deck that Ruth has made with all of these numbers in it. I know I say it all the time, but this is just such a great example of advocacy and collaboration. How do we talk about what we do, and how do we team up with other people doing things in the world to propel all of us forward? There has to be an urgency for a change, and I think we're getting there, friends. I'm so proud of you for listening today. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Perform International. There are some huge, awesome things happening over there. So if you're thinking about traveling internationally or nationally, give them a ring-a-ling. I know that I'm going to be going on a couple trips with them this summer around the States as we are seeing choirs go on tour and have such amazing memories together, because they need to know that they belong in our musical world. So thank you, Perform International, for sponsoring the podcast. All right, that's enough for me. Let's hear from relevance strategist and absolute arts administration powerhouse, Ruth Hartt, and how to empower small budget arts leaders for change. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we have returning guest and dear friend, Ruth Hartt. Hello, Ruth.
Hi, Emily. It's good to be back.
I'm so glad to have you back. It is so much fun to now call you a friend after having first met you on stage at a Chorus America conference, just rocking the opening keynote. And Alex Gardner and I were losing it at our table, yes, what she said, nonstop. So I'm so glad we're now friends.
I love it. Absolutely.
Well, you came on the podcast earlier and talked about culture for hire, but we're talking a little bit different this time. But in case people didn't catch you on that episode, can you tell the listener, who are you? How did you get to where you are? What's some of your background? Because I think my students are going to really love your story.
Yeah. So I spent the first about 17 years of my career as an opera singer and a music educator. So I was doing all the things. I was performing, I was singing in choirs, conducting choirs, doing musical theater productions, you name it. And then, life sort of hit me in the face and I needed to find a job that would pay the bills. And so I actually landed at a think tank, which is so hilarious to me because that's not something I ever considered in my life as a career path. But I took an administrative role at a think tank that was connected to Harvard Business School. It was founded by Clayton Christensen, who is one of the world's top business thinkers. And as I became familiar with his ideas and the research that they were doing at this think tank, I had this light bulb moment, because the work that we do at the Institute is all about these innovation frameworks that have really transformed the way business leaders think about growing sustainable companies and about attracting and retaining customers. And so I had this moment of, well, what about, my old world, the world of the arts, where we are struggling building sustainable enterprises and attracting and retaining customers. And so that really launched this passion project of mine, where alongside my work as chief of staff at the Institute, I now have this side, I call it my 5 to 9, where I'm exploring these ideas around what does it mean to apply these innovation frameworks from the business world to the arts sector, and how are these ideas going to move us through this, really rough period of pandemic into what does the future look like for the arts world in 2024. And so it's been a really fascinating journey for me. And it's been really exciting for me to kind of merge those two worlds together and find some synergy there.
I really love what you said in the early, it's a think tank. And so often I think we as performers, as musicians, take it for granted that we are natural problem solvers. We see a passage and we have to problem solve how to sing that passage in our voice, or we're getting into an ensemble setting and we have to figure out how to be a part of that ensemble. And there's so much innate problem solving that goes into being a musician. What an awesome career to end up in with all of your musical training and problem solving background. I think it's so important as we're studying and teaching and doing all the things that we remember we're not, quote, just a musician. I mean, that's also awesome in and of itself, but
Yep. It's so true. And I think as musicians too, I think we have to acquire all of these different skills that we wouldn't have thought, right? Like, if we are performers, we have to learn how to market ourselves, right? Yes. And so we have to learn the website design and the social media and all of that. And so, yeah, there's a lot of skills that come out of that work that I have really employed now in the work that I'm doing for my side hustle. So yeah, it's been great.
I love it. I always tell my students it's about advocating for what you know you can do, but not everyone else knows you can do that. Like the number of times you're like, I have a degree in this, and like, oh, you sing for me. Cool. Well, I'm also really great at ... And so we talk about how can you respond to that? Sure, I'll sing a tune for you, but I'm also really great at and advocating for yourself in that way, because we can't fall into those cool think tanks without it. So I'm so glad you're here sharing this and that you've gotten into this work. Can we dive into some hardcore information?
Let's do it. I am so excited about this.
So I had no idea about this 2022, geez Louise, that's hard to say, public participation survey of the arts from the NEA. Can you give us some of the information? Like, what are some of the bullet points we need to know from that survey of public participation?
Yeah, well, I want to start by acknowledging that I have spoken with so many arts leaders over the past year. And one of the biggest hurdles that everyone is talking about right now is this idea of the need to drive organizational change, right? There's a lot of issues that we're facing coming out of the pandemic, and everyone knows, okay, we need to start making some changes. But I also have learned from my work at the Institute that one of the most crucial elements that's required for actually being successful at driving change is a shared sense of urgency around the need for change. And I think back to when I was an opera singer and how I just was so, enamored with the process of performing and learning music and all of that. And I didn't really think so much about the audiences. And so I think as arts leaders are thinking about creating change, if your team members and your board members and your donors and even your audiences don't see that there's an urgent need for change, it's going to be really tough to motivate that work. And there's a quote from John Cotter, who's a change expert. He says, without an organization-wide sense of urgency, it's like trying to build a pyramid on a foundation of empty shoeboxes. So I think that's such a good visual there.
Such a good visual.
So I think it's really important to approach this conversation around change with real hard data, right? To say, okay, bring these numbers to the team, to our board, and say, look, this is what we're working with here. And so I was really drawn to the National Endowment for the Arts, their project around surveying the public for their participation in the arts. And I had been following this for a couple of years now. I found out that they do this survey. It's like every 5 to 10 years. It's not really quite consistently regular yet, but they started the survey in 1982 in collaboration with the U.S. Census Bureau. And it's been conducted over the years to track changes in arts participation in the U.S. And I think the value of this survey is that you get to observe these macro trends across all these different disciplines, across decades, and you start to really see how audiences have evolved over time. And it's really eye-opening. So I have been eagerly awaiting this particular release because this 2022 report shows us what has changed since the pandemic. The last time they did a survey was 2017. So Yeah. So a couple of
Whoa.
years before the pandemic. And so now that they've got these numbers out, you can really see where we landed after COVID. And particularly because all of these experts in business and elsewhere were predicting that COVID-19 was going to accelerate existing industry trends. And so I was very interested to see where we landed.
I'm taking down some great notes.
Yeah.
I love what you were saying. Like, these numbers are showing where we landed post-COVID, because we all thought, I mean, we all know from the experience that arts were what kept people human. I mean, there's so many ways to say that. So you would expect to see this massive influx. I want to know what the numbers say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I'll do is I'll walk you through. I'm going to start in 1982 so you can kind of see the picture and see what the trends were.
It's like a story. Oh, I'm so excited.
It
Story
is,
with
yeah.
numbers.
And so last month, I probably spent, I don't know, 20 hours on this because, the NEA has the numbers, but they don't really show over the last 4 decades what that trend really looks like visually. So yeah, experts predicted that the pandemic would accelerate industry trends by about 10 years. So whatever was happening in your industry was going to suddenly be ahead of the trend line by 10 years. And it was called the Great Acceleration Theory. So I wanted to find out, did this happen in the arts? The reality is it's actually even more sobering than it was predicted in the art sector, at least. So let's start with 1982. So in 1982, and I like to look at outside of the arts sector as well, because I think it provides a really great barometer for sort of public engagement in general. So in 1982, Americans were engaging in a lot of different activities for cultural enrichment and entertainment. You might not be surprised to hear that movies were leading the way, right? So 63% of the US population were regularly, or at least once a year, attending movie theaters.
That makes total sense, because wasn't it like 79, the blockbuster phenomenon with Jaws and all that stuff? So that makes total sense. By 82, yes, 63%.
I blame it all on Star Wars.
Okay, there's the Jaws and the Star Wars thing. We could talk about films for a very long time, but let's, back to numbers.
Yeah. Sports, of course, are another, professional sports events were another popular choice. 48% of the US population were attending sports events. So we get down into what do the arts look like in 1982? Interestingly, craft fairs were very popular. 39% of the population were attending craft fairs, which I think is interesting.
I mean, I remember going to those all the time with my parents as a kid.
Right?
That makes sense. Kid of the 80s. Yeah.
This was before the internet. So what were we supposed to do with our time? Yeah,
before Amazon and all the search and all. Okay. Arts fairs, the precursor to Amazon and Etsy.
Yep. And then following craft fairs, art museums brought in about 22% of the population, which was fairly decent. Musical theater was bringing in 19% of the population. So classical music, and I know a lot of your listeners are into specifically the choral world. The NEA doesn't break it down in terms of what is choral. They talk about classical music and they talk about opera. So we'll look at those numbers and you can sort of extrapolate from there. So for classical music, we had about 13% of the population attending classical music concerts. And straight theater was 12%. Ballet and opera was 4% and 3% of the population. Whoa. Is that surprisingly small?
Seems really tiny.
Yeah, we started in 1982. Yeah, with 3% of the population attending opera. Yeah, I was surprised too. Wow. Compare that to 63% of people attending movies.
Or 30-something or 20-something going to crafts fairs.
Yeah. Yep.
I bet it's cold at some of those craft fairs. I'd stay inside.
Yeah. And so if you look over the next 10 years, so they didn't do another survey until 1992. So there's 10 years in between the first and the second SPPA. And attendance for cultural events actually increased slightly, except for classical music. So classical music declined by 4%. And then as you look through the 1990s, across the board, most arts disciplines did see small declines. while, movies and sports attendance actually remained pretty stable. Ballet dropped 17%, which is quite a large drop, and classical music audiences dropped by 7%. That was in the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah. So one of the things that was happening during the 90s was households across the US were buying computers, personal computers.
Right.
You remember, I'm sure you remember this, right? You're
dial up.
we were starting to use the internet. And then a little bit later, we were starting to use smartphones, social media came along. And following that, streaming platforms like Netflix and Hulu and Prime and YouTube and Spotify. So all of those things really started to transform the way we communicated and accessed information and, chose entertainment and cultural activities. And then we get to the 2000s, and you probably remember we had a global financial crisis in 2008. Yeah, so most arts disciplines faced really big challenges during this time in maintaining their audiences. Across the board, there were 20 to 30% declines in audiences during this time period. Yeah. Major dips. And of course, there's that correlation between, if people are losing their jobs and are not making the kind of money they need to make, they're not going to go to the arts.
Right. And wasn't there was kind of another recession in the 90s too, which probably, because we talk about that in my history of rock and roll class, is how that impacted the development of bands and the crossover between alt and indie and mainstream and all that.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, those are, it's always so closely intertwined.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So as the country started to recover from this crisis, we started to see a recovery in the arts as well. There were modest increases. When we look at the 2017 SPPA, which shows you how, what the recovery looked like from 2008 to 2017, we see decent increases, but not in classical music.
No, it just stayed down.
I know, right? It continued to decline, this time by another 2%.
Wait, it kept going down. Oh, I'm so sad for it.
I know. Yeah. And it's so funny because I think back to this time, during this time period, I was, blissfully pursuing a career as an opera singer. And I had no idea that all of this was happening.
All the rest of the world was like, I'm not going to go to that. And I remember the same thing. I was just soaking it up in that time frame. That's when I was going to everything.
Yeah. And it's so funny how, we just did not realize
a bubble.
Yeah, we were in a bubble. Exactly. Yeah. So then we're jumping from the 2017 SPPA to the one that just came out, the 2022 SPPA. They just released the numbers.
You're going to have to do these things a lot faster because the world is changing too quickly. That is too long of a time frame.
I agree. So of course, it's no surprise, right, that the major upheaval that COVID also brought staggering decreases again in attendance across all categories because no one was going anywhere, right? Lockdowns, safety concerns, restrictions on gatherings. So 2022, of course, we should start to see a return. I think 2020, there was probably zero attendance anywhere, but 2022, we're vaccinated. People are starting to return. And ticket buyers did start to return, but we saw some pretty big losses, opera in particular and theater as well, but I'll run through the numbers here. So the percentage change from 2017 to 2022, and I know it's a lot of numbers, but I think it's
so important. I'm not a numbers person. That gets me confused, but this is like you're giving it to me in a good storyline.
Okay, good. All right. So we saw opera audiences plummet 68%. So this was from 2017 to 2022. Yeah. Theater audiences dropped by 52%. Musical theater dropped by 38%. Ballet dropped 36%. Jazz dropped 27%. Art museums dropped by 25%. And classical music, which we're all waiting for the number there. Classical music attendance declined by 47% from 2017 across the pandemic. Yeah. So There definitely is a correlation there, right, between COVID and the declines that we're seeing. But when you look at the overall picture, the picture we just walked through, I think it's pretty clear that we can't blame it all on COVID, right? And I think it's kind of easy to want to do that, but COVID is not the root cause of our current struggles attracting audiences. I think, just like the experts were predicting that the pandemic was going to accelerate existing trends, that's what we saw. But
I just thought we'd be trending in the other direction.
I know. But these trends were already set in motion by a number of different factors, which really led audiences to see less and less relevance in what arts organizations had to offer. Because, it's easy to say, well, maybe it was, ticket cost or convenience or lack of time or, too many competing options or the internet, right? But I love what Jay Baer has to say about this. Jay Baer is, he's a global business strategist and a customer experience expert. And he says, actually, none of that really matters. What actually matters is how relevant you're making your offering to your target audiences. Yeah.
I mean, that's so true.
Yeah.
I just went to the proms, the BBC proms. I went to one showing. I was so excited. I always want to go to the proms. But I remember sitting there and just looking around, and there was a young person beside me, like in teens maybe. There was a cute little couple in front of me. There was the older couple. There was such diversity in that audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's because it was Max Richter, and that's a pretty good film score name / it's the classical music reimagined. So I don't know if it was because of who it was or because it was the proms or whatever, but I just remember sitting back thinking, this place is packed, and it's not packed with one specific kind of person. What are they doing to make that happen?
Yeah. And I'm sure the Max Richter element was definitely a factor. I mean, that kind of music is just more familiar to people in 2020, 2023, right?
But that's the relevance thing. He's a relevant composer.
Mm-hmm.
And the opening piece was one I had not heard or listened to much. And then the second half was, of course, reimagined. It was all of the awesome spring, summer, winter, all of those. It was so good. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But that relevance is so key. What a great quote.
Yeah. Well, and he actually, and I have the whole quote here because I think it's so powerful. He says, if you're convinced that the problem with your marketing is that your customers don't have time, that they're too busy and they're ignoring you because they have too much going on in your life, you're lying to yourself. He says relevance creates time and relevance creates attention. So if your marketing is not working as well as you think it could or should, in almost every case, the root problem is that it's not relevant enough for the consumer. Wow. Yeah. Hits hard. It hits hard. And a lot of us in the art sector are thinking, well, maybe with COVID on the decline, maybe ticket buyers are going to start to feel more comfortable returning. But my question is, do we really have time to wait and see? Because if you look at the overall numbers from 1982 all the way to 2022, it's even more staggering, I think. Classical music attendance dropped 65% over the last 4 decades.
Wow.
Yeah.
If it keeps up, who's going to be going to anything?
Right. Exactly. You look at opera audiences have declined by 77% since 1982. And right now in 2022, just 0.7% of the US population are attending opera performances. At classical music, we're at 5%. So yeah, I feel like we're at the point where we don't have time to wait and see. What we do now is we figure out what change looks like.
Oh, that's so okay. So let's go. Let's move away from the sadness of these numbers. What does change look like, Ruth? What are we doing?
Well, it's that idea of relevance, and my work that I do at Culture for Hire is really, I call myself a relevance strategist, because until you figure out what is relevant for these people you're trying to reach, they're just not going to care about what's happening in the arts. And I think that's really the key. When I moved from, the opera stage to the business world, these ideas around, why people buy, it really completely changed the way I thought about audiences. And it also, as I was looking at these SPPAs with sort of these, shocked eyes, like, 3% attending opera. But, learning these ideas around relevance and why people buy it really instantly gave me hope for the future of the arts sector, because these are really powerful ideas and powerful strategies that we haven't tried yet. We haven't employed these yet. And we've seen them play out in the business world to really great success. And we just need to start pulling these ideas in and start implementing them. So Clayton Christensen's framework, he calls it the jobs to be done framework. And it's this idea that people don't simply buy things. Like they don't just go out and, buy a product or a service, or let's say a concert ticket, but they actually hire them. They bring them into their lives to help them make progress.
What a great visual.
Right?
Say that again.
Yeah. So people don't simply buy things, but they hire them, or they pull them into their lives to help them make progress on something.
So good.
And I know you're probably instantly thinking of something that you bought recently that you were like, oh yeah, I bought that not because I needed that tube of toothpaste, but because I wanted to support this idea of sustainability, and I want to, or whatever it is. There's always something that we're trying to make progress on, and we're looking for solutions out there in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this eye-opening perspective shift for arts organizations, I think, where instead of it being all about the art and the artist, it actually, to attract customers, it can't be about that at all. It has to be about the customer and what kinds of progress they're looking to make in their lives.
That's so good.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden, marketing changes. Instead of, trying to sell tickets with what I see as very product-centric, and I call it egocentric marketing, because it really comes across that way to people who are not part of this world of the arts. All of a sudden, it shifts to, okay, we need to understand the struggles that our target audiences are facing, and we need to make sure we're creating offerings that target those needs. And in our marketing, we have to prove that our offerings are the best solutions for those needs that they're facing. And then we also have to inspire them to invest in themselves. Just like you and I were talking earlier about, massages and eyebrows and things like that before we hopped on the podcast. Yes. We have to inspire them that, art is an investment that's going to make their lives better, that's going to enrich their lives, it's going to do all these incredible things that we know as artists. But the general, we'll call them the lay person out there in the world that's not familiar with the art in the ways that we are, they don't know all of these benefits. So we have to kind of teach them.
We were just talking, I was at a business dinner a couple of days ago. We were just talking about a couple different choir sounds and how sometimes you go to a choir concert and you are just moved by the emotion and the singing, and you can't help but feel emotion with the ensemble. And then sometimes you go to a concert and it's just so impeccably done and so gorgeously executed that it's not that you are moved emotionally. It doesn't move you from your toes. You're in almost like this place of peace, but you're knowing what you're getting when you're going to these two ensembles, because we've grown up with the different sounds and the different types of choir and knowing, okay, we're going to get this experience at this ensemble and this experience. But the layperson doesn't know that, or doesn't know why they are feeling the urge to experience an emotion in a certain situation.
Absolutely. And they don't even really know what excellence sounds like.
Correct.
They could hear one ensemble and another ensemble and not really understand, So excellence for them, we typically market that way. We're the best choir in, the Western, I don't know, whatever. But they're like, what does that even mean? That doesn't mean anything for me. I don't know what artistic excellence, how that improves my life.
It's not definable. It's all based on your own ear interpretation and expectations.
Exactly. Yeah. And so this shift really helps create the relevance that they need to say, or to go from, like, who cares, to, oh, wow, that sounds interesting. That sounds helpful to me, right? That might help me make progress on my, I don't know, my mental health, my physical health, whatever it is. There's ways to sort of help them see that relevance.
And it all started by you looking at these numbers and kind of transferring what you do in your 9 to 5 to your passions, to your interests. So I know you have some really awesome things planned for January. Can you tell us what you are doing to help those of us that are on this side of the sphere make this change?
Yes. Yes, because I know as people sit here listening to these numbers, they're probably thinking, "Oh my God, this is horrible. What am I supposed to do now? What does the future of the arts sector look like?" So I do have a couple of offerings that I hope will be helpful for arts leaders. The first is I took all of this data and I created a slide deck. So there's a 28-page slide deck that provides graphs where you can actually see visually what this looks like over the last. I
almost asked you if you had a visual. I'm like, could you talk to me with some pictures?
I know, it's so much easier, and I'm a very visual person, so that's kind of what led me to do this. But it's 28 pages with graphs for each discipline showing audience trends over the past 4 decades. I also have included the data around movie attendance and sports and internet and social media, because I think it's a really interesting comparison when you're looking at these trends outside the arts sector. And so it's a PDF that I think could be a really crucial resource that you can bring to your team or your board to start creating that shared sense of urgency that we talked about earlier around this need for change. Because I think when we are armed with information, it's so much easier to start motivating that change. So the PDF is pretty easy to find. If you go to my website, it's cultureforhire.com. You should be greeted with a pop-up where you just click and go through and you can download. If the pop-up doesn't come up, you can go to, and I'll give the little link right now, it's bit.ly/2022 SPPA. So either of those ways, you should be able to find the PDF. So that's a start. If you want to dig deeper, if you're feeling that like stress and uncertainty, which so many arts leaders are right now, I'm really excited to share a workshop series that I've created for 2024. So this is a January workshop series. I want to help arts leaders sort of kick off the new year with some energy and some new perspectives and some hope for moving forward. And so I'm offering a series of 3 live online workshops. These will be over Zoom, and they're really designed to empower arts leaders to start to drive meaningful change. They're each 2 hours, and they're going to be a really collaborative kind of learning environment where you're going to be interacting with peers across the sector. So it's not just going to be orchestra leaders or choir leaders. It's really going to run the gamut. I think I have people that have signed up already. There's jazz, there's choir, there's orchestra, there's a theater. So I'm excited about that, because I think when you have all these different perspectives, it really sparks some interesting conversations and some interesting ideas. So we're going to explore a lot of these powerful perspective shifts that I've learned, these innovation frameworks that I've learned, and then we're going to talk about actionable strategies and cross-disciplinary insights that I think are going to be really helpful as people are trying to navigate, what does change look like? What is 2024 going to look like? And how do I start, shifting my organization? So the first workshop is all about rethinking relevance. And we're going to talk about that jobs to be done idea and sort of a new framework for relevance and why it matters for arts leaders to adopt the framework and what it looks like to adopt it. Mm-hmm. The second one is rethinking tradition. And this is the workshop where I pull in concepts from Priya Parker's book, The Art of Gathering, which is one very pivotal book that I read last year. We're going to talk about enhancing engagement by embracing inclusion. So how to make your events more human-centered and more welcoming, where you're fostering a spirit of creativity and innovation for those audiences that are loyal, that keep coming back, but also creating a sense of belonging and psychological safety for those who traditionally have not seen relevance in your world and who have not felt welcome in your world because of the traditions that have come from, the 19th century. And then the third one is, I call it rethinking purpose. And we talk about how when you clarify your mission around a meaningful purpose, it really unleashes potential for growth. And we dig deeper into this idea of jobs to be done and how you can base your mission of your entire organization around a customer need or a customer job to be done. We pull in a little bit more from Priya Parker and Clayton Christensen, and then we talk about the Savannah Bananas.
I love the Savannah Bananas.
I do too.
I've been multiple times. I run by their stadium 3 times a week on my runs, and they are so cute.
They are amazing. Their story is incredible, and
their story is so incredible.
It's incredible. They've rethought purpose and leaned into the purpose, their meaningful purpose, and it has brought them amazing success.
The transformation is insane. Having been in Savannah when we had the Sand Gnats, and then when it was just college ball that came through, and then this banana ball. Yes, please. That is my type of baseball. I will go. If anyone offers me tickets, I'm like, I'm there. Always.
And now they're touring the country. They've got like 80,000 people on their waiting list and like 2.5 million followers on TikTok, and all because they really thought about their purpose and how it applied to their mission and the work.
Field trip to Savannah, everybody. We're going to go to a Savannah Bananas game.
I would love that.
Do you know why they're called the Savannah Bananas?
They invited the city to name them, and they picked like the weirdest name possible.
So it's actually not weird. We're a huge port city, and we are one of the highest importers of bananas.
I did not know that.
Neither did I until we had the Savannah Bananas.
Oh my goodness.
Plus, it's also really fun to say it. I've made warm-ups out of Savannah Banana.
I bet you have. Yeah. They're amazing. And
gosh. So it's so much fun. But look at this here, like the banter that we can talk about and the joy that it brings. And someone who is not a baseball fan, no offense, baseball, it's just a little bit long, a little boring. I just went for the organ songs. Now I go because it is a party.
Yes.
It is entertaining from the second you walk into the stadium until you leave. And they have just done everything to make it relevant to all folks.
Absolutely. And of course, it's a fantastic case study, but I always end up by saying, okay, we can't all make fun our purpose, right? I mean, orchestras and choirs and things, fun doesn't really work. So you have to think about what is the need that is shared by our community that we are best positioned to address. And of course, for the Savannah Bananas, it was fun and entertainment. So the work for arts organizations is figuring out, what is our meaningful purpose? One of the groups that I've worked with in Boston, the Seraphim Singers, we chose the purpose of providing an antidote to stress. And so the tagline on their website is now space to breathe. So, that meaningful purpose now informs every decision that they make. And that's really the foundation for becoming a truly customer-centric organization. So I'm so excited to see some arts organizations start to pull these ideas in.
I'm so excited for this series. Thank you for mentioning the Savannah Bananas because it makes me so excited about my sweet little town of Savannah. But I think what I'm really excited to see as you're being this relevance strategist, the shift to the positive. So often you look at some of the social media strains in our world, and it's just so sad. And yes, we have a lot of things we need to talk about, and we need to have the support for that. But also I love that you're spinning it in a positive. Like, yes, the numbers are in the pits, but that doesn't mean we have to be. We can spin this in a positive way. We can become relevant. We just have to do the work. And I think your workshops are awesome.
I'm excited too. I think it's just a whole new way of looking at the world from the perspective of the people that we serve. And it's, like I said, we haven't really pulled these ideas in and employed these ideas as fully as we could. And I really do think it offers a lot of hope for moving forward in our sector.
Definitely positive hope. So if someone is listening and is thinking, this workshop series is for me and my team, I need to get my team on board so we are all together in our urgency to drive the change, where do they find out more?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is cultureforhire.com. And under the About tab, there's a little link for workshops. So if you click that, you'll see all the descriptions of the 3 different workshops and find out how to sign up and all of that. So yeah. Also, please reach out if you're interested, but you're not sure, this is right for you. I'm happy to chat or, talk via email about that as well.
I would love to see this turn into like a little bitty blog post. Do you have anything on your blog about this as well, like answering the FAQs on if this workshop is for you?
At the moment, I don't, but I'm putting out a podcast this weekend, actually. I think that'll answer some of those questions. So
awesome.
find that on my website as well.
That should be out because this will go out in 2 weeks. So that should be out by the time this is out. So that's perfect timing. So y'all go listen. What's the name of your podcast?
It's called Pivot, because we're talking about pivoting from the product-centric approach to the customer-centric approach. So you can find it on my website, but it's also on Apple and Spotify and some other places as well.
Oh, I'm so happy. Ruth, it is always so inspirational and encouraging, but also positive and helpful talking to you. Thank you for sharing your incredible knowledge.
It's an honor to be here again, Emily. I think you're doing such great work as well, and just sharing these really, inspiring and insightful stories with people. And yeah, I'm really eager to help in any way that I can and bring these new insights that I've learned to the arts world. So thank you so much for helping me do that.
I'm so happy. Okay, so before we say goodbye, you have to give the listener the one thing that really matters, the thing you want them to remember from this episode. There's a lot of things I want them to remember, so you better pick one.
Oh, right. Oh my gosh, that's a hard choice. I think what matters is, like you said, the numbers look dire, but there are new ways of approaching how we do things in the arts world. And I think now is the time. I think COVID has given us the impetus to really start to shift and to pivot to, that customer-centric approach. So I think there is definitely hope.
Yeah, there's definitely a path forward. Thank you so much for all of your work and for being back here on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Emily. It's great to see you.
I hope you feel optimistic. I hope you feel empowered. I hope you feel that we are all in this working and that there are so many resources and places you can go to find that urgency and drive the necessary change. People are amazing and we're doing the best that we can. Let's team up and let's get resources and let's band together and let's make this happen. Let's change the trajectory of those numbers. I hope you know that you matter. We all know that music matters, especially attending the arts. And I'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.